Hello, I'm Stephanie Young. I'm currently a candidate for state representative in the new 16th House District. I am serving my first term as a freshman out of Detroit. And you know, redistricting has done a bit of a number on many of us. Nobody knew what the new redistricting commission was going to do. But I have to say this, I was a little bit shocked when they drew me in from having had 100% of Detroit, now to about 44% of Detroit, and they drew me into South Redford and parts of southeastern Livonia. I have to say, it was a pretty smart move because I've met some amazing people here, particularly in Redford Township. And so one of the things that I wanted to share with folks, as you get to know me, and preferably over the next couple of years, you get an opportunity to get to know me as I get to know you, some of the things that I've currently been working on. I have a long history of public service and community service. I started straight out of Michigan State University in the House of Representatives. That was my very first professional job. And I went on to work for an additional 2 state representatives. From there, I landed in the mayor's office. I've had an opportunity to work for 4 mayors in the city of Detroit. And what that does is, it gives me a unique lens into the needs of regular everyday citizens. Simple things like making certain the trash gets picked up on time. These are simple quality of life issues that everybody cares about, whether you live in Detroit, Redford Township, or Livonia. And so since I've been in the legislature, there are a few things that I've found that we all have in common. We know that it's unfortunate that seniors, after retiring, are having their pensions taxed. We continue to work on repealing the senior and the retirement tax. When we're working in the legislature and we're looking at other things that have been doing a disservice to folks, those are just some of the things that we fight for. Voting rights. I have legislation currently that would protect folks, that would make certain when you go to vote, you'll be safe by banning open carry at the voting booth. And then I dropped the second bill, we say drop, but I introduced a second piece of legislation that would not just ban open carry at voting locations, but also at the counting boards. Because unfortunately, we found that these are places that have become tents over the past few years. And we want people to know that you have to feel safe when you're going to exercise your right to vote. It's sacred, and nothing should prevent folks from doing that. And so I'm proud of that legislation. I'm also proud to have sponsored legislation that expands the workforce. We know that as a result of COVID, many employers have been struggling trying to find workers. It's like, where did they all go? And so folks have come and said, we need help. They needed help from the legislature. And I was able to introduce legislation that would allow younger people to get into the workplace. And that legislation was signed by our very own Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And now, as a freshman legislator serving in the minority, I already have a public act. I'm currently in line to have my second public act because I have legislation that was passed from the House and the Senate and is now sitting on the governor's desk, and it has to do with our foster care system. I don't know how many of you all are aware, but unfortunately here in the state of Michigan, our foster care system is broken. Our children, our babies that fall into the state's care are not getting the treatment that they should. We recently, myself and other colleagues, we actually gave comments as it relates to the brokenness of the educational component of the foster care system. When we have our children who at the age of 18 are aging out, only to discover after having gone to classes, after believing that they were earning credits that would get them a diploma, they find that at the age of 18, now aging out, they only have school credits for 10th grade. That's devastating for them. And so we are now working with the department, with the Michigan Department of Education and with the Health and Human Services Department to figure out how we fix this, because we cannot allow that to continue to happen for these children, for these young people who ended up in the system for no reason. They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything wrong for no reason of their own. And so with that, I also would like to share some other things. My campaign has always been based on 3 pillars. Let me just go back there. 3 pillars: healthy families, thriving communities, and quality public education. And so when we think about healthy families, one of the things that I think about is when folks move into their homes, these homes built back in the 70s, they still had lead paint. And so there are a number of different programs where people can buy older homes, but there's no testing. And so I introduced legislation that would test, that would make it mandatory for there, not to test, but for there to be a disclosure that they're lead-based paint for the person who is looking to buy that property to be able to test that home to see. I think we need to know ahead of time. We don't want people, particularly folks with young children, moving into homes with lead paint dangers in the household. We know what happened even when it comes to our water lines. I'm already working on some legislation around making certain that we can continue to make those repairs across the state, because it's needed, to make certain that we have safe drinking water. The Flint just began to shine a light on that, but there are other places like Benton Harbor, they're dealing with these same issues. And so we don't need that to continue to happen, because it's about our children. Our children suffer when the water isn't clean, as well as so many others. And then when I look at other things that we've been doing, like I said, I have been a Detroiter all my life. And so when I thought about some legislation, there's things called drive-by shootings that are happening too much. And it's not just happening in Detroit. And I'm on a package of bills. It's a bipartisan package of legislation that deals with drive-by shootings. And my bill in particular would increase fines for those people who just haphazardly decide to go and settle a score, knowing that there are children in the house, knowing that there's the potential that a baby could get shot. And so we want to make certain people know that it's time out for that type of behavior. It has to end. And sometimes ending it has to start with legislation that mandates different types of penalties. Another thing that I've been working on, one of my very first bills that I'm really, really proud of, is FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. Earlier last year, there were a whole series of bills dealing with updating FOIA. I'm not certain how many of you know, but in the state of Michigan, legislators and the executive branch are exempt from FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act. You can't FOIA any information on them. And I'm thinking, as public servants, you wouldn't think that was so, but it is. And so within that package of bills, we began to update other laws. And one of those laws had to do with the fact that persons who are incarcerated don't have access to FOIA. And in my time in the legislature, just a short time, I had an opportunity to meet a group of people who are now call themselves the Organization of Exonerees. These are men and women who have served time, but decades sometime. I met a gentleman who served over 36 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. And so when I talked to them, they said, you know what, Representative, something that could have helped us would have been the opportunity to FOIA information about our own case, and our own case only. I'm not looking to find out what's going on in your life or anybody else's, but if we had an opportunity to FOIA information about our own cases, we could have shaved decades off of our sentences. Because the truth of the matter is, when you end up in prison, your family is with you, but they have limited resources. Your family and friends care about you, but they have limited time to be able to help. And the person that's incarcerated, the person that's fighting for their freedom, they have the time, but unfortunately not the resource, not the access. And so House Bill 4617 would do just that. It would allow incarcerated persons the opportunity to FOIA information on their case only. And so that got a hearing in the Oversight Committee, and hopefully it's going to get to the House floor and get to the Senate. And so we can have yet another public act as a freshman, doing those things that matter to people. And then one of the last thing I wanted to talk about as it relates to crime and safety and just criminal justice reform is pre-trial bail reform. how many of you all know that if there's a person who has the money to bond out and there's a person who doesn't, and their crime is exactly the same, the person who does not goes to jail and the person who does gets to go home. And so that's just a policy of incarcerating poor people. There's just no other way around it. If I don't have the ability to pay, then I get locked up. And one of the things that many people don't know are the consequences that comes with that. So you're already struggling to make ends meet. You're already struggling to get to work sometime. And now you've pulled over, and because you didn't have $250, they lock you up. So then you lose your minimum wage job. So then now you could potentially even get in trouble with CPS because you weren't able to pick your children up after school, all because you couldn't make bond. And so I'm a part of yet another bipartisan package that will allow people an opportunity to post on their own recognizance. I promise I'm coming back. There are studies that show that posting bail doesn't guarantee people are going to return. People return because they know it's the right thing to do. And so there are folks who will be able, if this legislation passed, to go ahead and to get out on their own recognizance, saying that I'm coming back. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to get back to work. Thank you for allowing me to be able to pick my children up and not having to suffer. So I'm excited about that legislation as well because it's so necessary. And yeah, I'm also a part of school safety. So like I talked about, quality public education. In addition to that, it's hard for children to learn when they don't feel safe. It's hard for children to learn when there's anxiety. And so there's another bipartisan bill package that I'm a part of that's helping increase safety around our schools and making certain that when our children go to learn, that's what they do. And you know, I could go on and on about some of the things that I've been doing. I could go on and on about some of the things that I currently want to do, but I just encourage people to check me out. You can go to my Facebook page, Stephanie Young for State Representative. You can feel free to, you know, look me up. You can contact me by email, staterep.stephanieyoung@gmail.com, and I'll be certain to return your correspondence. So thanks for your time today. Stephanie Young for State Representative, House District 16.